I've done this before.
So, are you DTFF?
Once again, here's Drinking and Talking Fantasy Football with your host, Jake Trowbridge and Dustin Lunt.
Good evening, everyone. Happy Tuesday. If you're joining us live, thank you so much. We have got a great episode this evening. If you can't tell, third person joining us. I suppose if you're listening to us after the fact, you wouldn't know that. But yes, we have a very special guest back on the show. Repeat guest, Zach. Welcome to the show. How are you doing this evening?
I am doing very well, Dustin. It's good to be back. I'm multiple time guest of this show. One of my favorite shows.
Yeah.
To listen to, one of my favorite shows to come guest on. You guys are a blast.
Oh, yeah. You're in very rare air here as the multiple time returning guest on our show.
I think this is a three-peat, if I'm not mistaken, for you, Zach. And we could be no happier, possibly.
Mhm.
I mean, especially given what we're talking about in this episode. It just feels like the perfect marriage yet again.
We're back at it. I love the rookies. You know that.
Too.
And there's no one better. I just didn't announce it here when I introduced you, but co-host of the Dynasty Dummies podcast. And I just want to say, I look forward to the Hootenanny every year. It's one of my favorite strings of podcasts to listen to because you guys just the amount of information you pack into those episodes is incredible. So I applaud you on job well done with that because it is just great quality analysis.
It's so much fun. It's really the credit should go to J Mike though. Like he's the one that hosts it. He's the one that packs everything in. I'm just the mouth. He does all the yeoman's work. So.
Well, before we get into all of our rookie discussion, I got to say hi to Jake, my co-host. How are you doing this evening, sir?
Wonderful. Trying my best to block out certain chunks of this weekend, maybe for a certain team that we don't have to talk about, that we happen to like as NFL fans. But outside of that, I'm doing pretty phenomenal. It feels like we're breezing right through this schedule here, already into week 8 of the NFL season. I don't get it. I don't get how we got here, frankly. I think I browned out for a large chunk of the season. But yeah, I was looking at our home league, and we're already sitting here more than halfway through our fantasy regular season. So, Dustin, are you ready to close this thing out? Are you ready to drift in to the second half of this season?
Well, at this point, it feels like it's going to be a slog getting to the end of the season here, just with the amount of injuries. I know this week we have no buys on the radar, so that's nice. But I know we're going to have plenty of them coming up here to have to work through, making those start-sit decisions even more critical. And I'll admit, I've been a little under par this fantasy season so far. So maybe I can turn it around here in the second half and make something happen.
That's what you got to hope for. That's what you got to hope for. Where if you're relying on a few of these players that we have some news about, that's not going to help things. Speaking of injuries, Zach Ertz going to IR. It's a bummer. Zach Ertz started out the season actually looking like a very respectable tight end that you could use, especially those first few weeks. Now he's out. He was already kind of being overtaken by Trey McBride, though, the last couple of weeks. So, Zach, is there any inclination for you from a short-term perspective to put a lot into Trey McBride, or is it still a strictly longer-term play?
I mean, it'll be interesting to see how they use him, but again, still a younger tight end. He can't be young anymore, but he's a younger tight end, and he was a really fun prospect, really athletic, really talented coming out. So dynasty wise, a player that I'm excited about. One of the when I take my scattershot tight end approach, McBride is often one of the tight ends that I target, and so it'll be interesting. Still, not a great offense in Arizona. And so it'll be interesting to see how he gets used, see if he can kind of fall into the end zone and you make your bones that way, but not. I don't expect Trey McBride to be a top 5 tight end, the rest of the way.
That's fair. Good to lower those expectations for people who kind of get a little crazy. I think we all get a little crazy with tight ends because they're so sparse. So I understand it. Dustin, anything? I mean, I guess a streaming option for you to consider. Joshua Dobbs is trying his best with this offense, but it's tough.
He is. Yeah, I guess he, play the matchups. There's worse options out there than him. Maybe he'll get a little bit more run if Kyler returns here. I know that window's been opened up for Kyler to come back. So that's something to look at too, as if Kyler returns, how, if he kind of focuses on McBride there or, more of the wide receivers.
Yeah. Well, other bad tight end news, Dawson Knox getting surgery done on his wrist. So definitely not going to be a quick return for him. Why don't we preview? This is a rookie episode after all, that we're checking in on these guys. So Dalton Kincaid, all of a sudden now, here's your opportunity, kid. So Zach, I guess a two-parter. A, how do you feel about what he's actually done to this point? And does he warrant this serious hype that he's getting now, given the situation?
So Kincaid has been fine. I mean, he's sitting around tight end 20 on the season, been kind of a give and take between him and Knox. I do think, though, that what we do now in Dynasty, where we push guys up so fast and we get so excited and then we move on to the next big thing when that doesn't pan out, I think right now is a potential sell window on Kincaid, because I think people are going to be really excited about Kincaid, and I think he's fine. I think he's a good tight end. But when we did our hootenanny and we talked tight ends, it was Sam Laporta and then a pretty big gap, and then I had Michael Mayer and then Kincaid. So Kincaid's a player that I like to roster, but if everybody is going to get really excited and move Kincaid up in Dynasty further than I think is commensurate with what he's going to produce, then I think it's a decent sell window. But if you are looking for mid-range tight end production, Kincaid should walk into that. I mean, should be a good offense. They've been a little suspect, but that's a high power offense when things are right, when Josh Allen is rolling, and Kincaid can get down the field a little bit. He's a player who, as a tight end, which is pretty rare, can, put up a week in 2 catches, because he can actually get down the field, stretch the field, get that seam. And so he's a good player, but I think we're a little too excited. We get that rookie fever. We want him to happen much sooner, much quicker than he actually will.
He's the opposite of Zach Ertz athleticism-wise, essentially, at this stage in their respective careers. Dustin, let's talk about running backs real quick. So Jerome Ford is out a couple of weeks. I'm very sad. I picked up Jerome Ford once Nick Chubb went out. I was very excited that I made the right choice, it seemed like, out of him and Kareem Hunt. And now Jerome Ford's out. So now the question becomes Kareem Hunt or Pierre Strong. If you're looking at your waivers, Dustin, and you might be doing this in our home league, to be fair, do you have a preference to who you're picking up? Give me your dirty little secrets.
I think I'm going to go with Pierre Strong here. It is sad to see Ford go out. He was producing, not Nick Chubb levels, but I mean, he was producing very, very well in an offense that was really lacking any sort of stars and offensive firepower. So, but yeah, I'm going to go with Pierre Strong. We all thought when Kareem Hunt was signed onto the squad, he's the automatic, He's going to, insert him here. He's produced in this offense previously, yada, yada, yada. He's been fine, but he is definitely not the feature back that he once was. So give me Pierre Strong, the younger guy, more of the traditional Nick Chubb type runner in the offense, and Kareem Hunt will continue to kind of have that receiving role.
I could get on board with that. Zach, what are your thoughts on these two?
The interesting thing, though, with Hunt, I think, so I agree, Dustin, with you, but I think that Hunt is going to be that vulture in the goal. He was even that with Chubb for a long time, and it would frustrate the heck out of me because I love Nick Chubb. He's for my money, the best runner in the NFL. You'd see him take that, 40 or 50 or 60 yard run and it's just fantastic. They get to like the 5 and all of a sudden Kareem Hunt trots in. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So while I agree with you that Pierre Strong is far more dynamic and will probably get some between the tackles work, I'm really concerned that Hunt is going to come in, usurp the goal line work, get the touchdowns. He had 2 touchdowns last week on just 31 yards. I mean, that's where we're at. So it's not as exciting a backfield as it was 2 running backs ago, or even with Jerome Ford.
Mm-hmm. Got to give it to the Browns for finding new ways to bum us out. Just seems like every single week. So congratulations, Cleveland. You did it again. Dustin, speaking of doing it again, are you ready? Are you ready to pay out from last week, by the way? The bet that we made at the end of last week's show?
I'm not. No.
Well, why don't you mentally brace yourself? I'll give the audience just a very quick little recap of what happened. Our guest as well. So at the end of every show, we like to make a little bet, go head to head, NFL team versus NFL team that's actually playing each other that week. Last week, Dustin was allowed to make the bet. He could pick whatever thing came into his mind, and it came into a position group versus a position group. And it was the Miami Dolphins wide receivers versus the Philadelphia Eagles wide receivers. I recall saying that Philly was probably going to route through one specific wide receiver, whereas we would benefit, Eric and myself, from the Dolphins' plethora. And in fact, I don't have to just pretend that. We can show that. Roll the clip. No, I think we just sit back and watch Dustin have to squirm next week. As one of the receivers gets everything.
No. I'm going to be watching you two do shots next week, and it's going to be terrific. Thank you for that, Jake. That was amazing.
Welcome. I think Eric is the happiest out of all of us because he didn't really know what was going on, to be quite fair, but he jumped in and was a very willing participant. So, Dustin, yes, as the video showed, our listeners didn't get to see that, but the Miami receivers totaled 46.6 PPR points, Philadelphia 39.9, and the vast majority of that did go through A.J. Brown.
Blah, blah, blah. You're right again. All the more reason that I have to do this. And Jake and Eric, if you catch this after the fact, you both are amazing fantasy football prognosticators / geniuses. Congratulations.
I thank you for saying that. Thank you to Fireball, not a sponsor yet, for providing Dustin and his embarrassment fuel in that. Not embarrassment. It's really just fuel to hopefully get this one right at the end of today's show.
That's right. All right, Jake, should we move on to our favorite segment of the drunk trade?
Let's do it.
Drunk, hammered, drunk.
Drunk trade of the week.
Gentlemen, we are lucky. We are so lucky to be provided this week's drunk trade from Reddit. They're back. They're back, baby. Reddit offered up this one, and it's very timely. So this is kind of a concept trade as well. The trade itself is what it is, but I'm curious to get both of your reactions to the concept of this trade. So comes from KO Zeus, who says, I needed a bye week fill-in at running back this week, so I traded what's likely a late 2024 second-round pick for Antonio Gibson. We'll find out tonight. This was submitted yesterday. We'll find out tonight on Monday Night Football if his 4.1 points of contribution end up mattering. The situation was this. The submitter here was up 9 points with Brock Purdy, KJ Osborne, and Jake Moody left to go, and the other team had CMC. So I did a little bit of legwork here and figured out in a typical scoring format what ended up happening. So again, they were already up by 9 points. That grouping had gotten him 31.5 points, and CMC got 22.6 points. So Antonio Gibson did not matter in this situation. His 4.2 points did not matter in that. Now, hey, you get an extra few points to add on to your total points for the season. Maybe a tiebreaker comes into play at some point. But I'm curious about the philosophy behind this. Zach, do you do this? Is this your mentality when you're in Dynasty and you say, I got to scrape together a win, I'm going to do a fill-in piece trade like this?
So I don't mind doing a fill-in piece trade, but Antonio Gibson is kind of a perennially descending asset in terms of value in Dynasty. So if I'm going to make a trade, especially for a week, I'm going to go try to get one of these backup running backs I can get for cheap, who's going to fill in for a week. Donta Foreman last week. And obviously that looks great because he had a great week, but like somebody like that, I'll go, make a play. Or if I get flex spots, I got to be able to find somebody who's going to put up at least Antonio Gibson numbers on my bench. There's got to be some way to maneuver this. So I second round picks in season don't matter to me. I will trade those. Like those do not matter until I'm on the clock, until I'm ready to make, my draft picks and my rookie drafts. And oftentimes I don't have next year or this year's second, like the coming year's second, because I traded it last year because I like to buy on credit. So I don't dislike the strategy. Maybe do this like 3 beers deep instead of 6 and get somebody better than Antonio Gibson.
I love
that.
Dustin, what's your threshold? Yeah.
I agree with Zach. I think the rationale behind this is correct. It's spot on. Yeah, giving up what you're expecting to be a late second for a running back or a bye week fill-in, I think that is the right move. I would have hoped that, Antonio Gibson's not the answer, but maybe in this league, that's all he was able to get for that price. We don't know the league or, anything surrounding it. So maybe this was the best offer he could get for that late second. So, but yeah, I love the philosophy behind it or the rationale behind it. I'm all for it. And I think that is the right move, especially if you feel like it's going to be a close week and you're not real confident on any of your bench assets.
I've learned that I'm much stingier with my picks than you guys are. That's actually not surprising. I'm a very cheap person by nature, so I shouldn't be shocked by it. But I look at seconds like, oh man, I'm going to hoard second round picks. Third round picks, that's where I get crazy and I just start firing them out for anything. But I think it's probably tough at this point to find, maybe it's not, a fill-in running back for a third round that you'd feel comfortable with throwing out. Like you said, down to Foreman. I could get on that train. You could have just picked up Amari DiMarcado and started him like everybody said to this week. Nobody bailed on him after last week's dud performance. That's for sure. But yeah, it's an interesting one. Thank you, Reddit, as always.
As always, thank you. All right. So should we get into the main event here and really dive into these rookies and kind of the state of the state on this year's rookie class? Are we all in?
I'm excited.
I'm in.
All right. So I'm not going to start with Jake, your first question there. I'm going to skip over it because it's what I want to do. So Zach, which rookie has surprised you most to this point, whether it's good or bad? We don't care. Or if you do want to do one of each.
It's really easy. The good is really easy. I mean, it's Puka Nacua, like 5th round pick, a player that I had graded out as, I think, my 9th or 10th wide receiver in the class. Like, this was not a player that I was really excited about coming into the season. Yeah, he popped off at the Senior Bowl, but that's such a small sample size that it's really tough. And to me, the idea of the way running backs function and the way wide receivers function when there's a fill-in, when there's an injury. So like the Cooper Kupp injury. Generally, I think of running backs as an elevator where the next guy comes in, goes up to the top floor, and then he goes. Whereas wide receivers, I tend to think of as an escalator because the player who's coming in doesn't move into that number one role. There are at least 2 other receivers ahead of him, and the targets get allocated to the talent. Puka Nacua coming in as a 5th rounder, you're not expecting him to have the talent to drive the targets. After that first week, you're like, okay, well, this may be a fluke. We've seen Ogletree do this. We've seen Travis Fulgham do this. But he continued, and he continued, and he continued, and Cooper Kupp came back, and he continued, and he continued. And so this is bona fide wide receiver Puka Nacua, who everybody but Derek Brown that I know of absolutely biffed on.
Yeah, who knew that he was having brunch with Matt Stafford here in the offseason?
All the difference, doesn't it?
And
with Puka Nacua, so you saw like he came back. I know everybody was a little disappointed the first week back for Cooper Kupp because, oh man, Cooper Kupp got everything. Now Puka throwing back on the trash heap. This is what we expected all along. And then he comes back the very next week. And it's like, oh, remember me? I'm still really good here. And you're saying like the rest of the way you could anticipate him being that, right? Or are you expecting any back off?
Yeah, he should. Like, we've seen what the offense looks like in Los Angeles. We've seen what Puka Nacua looks like. We've seen him be able to separate against man. And the thing that he does really well, which is super cool, and especially within the framework of that offense working, obviously Cooper Kupp, he attacks zone defenses really well. He does a really good job finding those because there's a transition point in a zone defense because you're covering areas, not players. And so there's a handoff point where one defender hands off the receiver to the next defender who's covering the next area. And Nacua does a really good job finding out where that handoff point is and stopping because now nobody's got him and he's created a lane for the quarterback to throw. He's been really good at that. And the other thing is, it's his college performance was underwhelming. His draft capital was underwhelming. But what he is doing in the NFL matters more than any of that. Like that is what matters. And you've seen perennially 4 teams a year be able to sustain 2 top 24 wide receivers. And this is something I harp on a lot on the Dynasty Dummies podcast. We actually did an entire episode coming into the preseason about this because people look at, oh, he's just a slot receiver. Oh, he's a wide receiver too on a team. 4 teams every year, almost invariably, support 2 top 24 wide receivers. And Matthew Stafford has done it a bunch. And so to see Nacua do that and to see him do it continued with Cooper Kupp, I expect him to be a very, very good player. I think he's up to maybe top 17 wide receivers in DLF already. And I expect him to probably climb in ADP going forward.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about on the flip side here? And I know it's too early to declare any sort of rookies a bust, but who's been underperforming so far that you're a little surprised at?
So there are a couple. The first one is pretty obvious. It's Quentin Johnston. He was kind of consensus top 4 wide receiver coming out in this class. Went to the Chargers, ended up with the big arm quarterback in Justin Herbert. You're like, oh, this is going to be fantastic because Quentin Johnston can get downfield and win jump balls. Mike Williams goes down. You're like, this is, you couldn't script it any better for Quentin Johnston, and immediately he has 4 targets in 2 weeks, and Josh Palmer is the guy. Like that's exactly what you expected. So the Quentin Johnston thing, that is a little surprising, although if you go back and look at my write-up of Quentin Johnston, I gave him the white whale, the Moby Dick, where we're all chasing the Calvin Johnson. We're all chasing the DK Metcalf. We're chasing the big X wide receivers, and we forget about N'Keal Harry. We forget about Kevin White. We forget about all of these X wide receivers who didn't quite separate downfield, didn't quite get targeted in the areas where they could succeed closer to the line of scrimmage. And so that one is a surprise, but not completely blindsiding. The other player who, and he did well this week, but has disappointed the community at large because Jackson Smith-Njigba was the wide receiver 1, almost undisputed in this class. He was my 2, but still up there. Like this, like for him to not come out and draw targets or draw a ton of targets, even in that Seattle offense with DK Metcalf, with Tyler Lockett, it's been a little bit underwhelming, but I still think that he is a bona fide stud, and you'll see him the second half of the season pick up and draw more targets because he's really good. I know Jake Bobo had some targets last year and played last week and played a big snap share, and people are excited about him because nobody knew who he was, but it's still JSN there.
Mm-hmm.
Don't they want, I think everybody's searching for, we missed on Puka Nacua. So we're like, there's got to be another guy who's going to be like Puka, right? Oh, Jake Bobo. Let's make him that guy.
It's so funny to watch us chase that. And if you do, because so I prepped for your first question about whether the first round matters. And if you look at analytics, I know that's a bad word. I know that if we're a football guy, we can't talk about analytics, but the numbers say that Puka Nacua, being a 5th round pick, had about an 8% chance of producing a top 24 season in his career. Ooh. So and now that you've seen him produce, now he's one of those outliers. Like he's one of those 8%. He's good. So there's no question to me that Puka Nacua is a good player. But coming out, playing the numbers, because that's what you should be doing. If you make the bet that is most likely to happen all of the time, eventually you'll come out ahead. Like that's just how that works. The numbers, and it's not going to be the right play every time because it doesn't work that way. I know that we want to think that analytics has, this magic bullet and they can predict the future. It doesn't work that way. You're making the best bet the most often, and eventually that shakes out over the large sample size. And so that to me is, how you play. You don't chase because it's rare. And if you're chasing, if you got Puka Nacua in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round of your rookie draft, that's when you should be chasing those guys, because those, a 3rd or a 4th or a 5th round pick in a rookie draft, those don't matter. Those don't ever hit. Like, those are 2, 3, 4% chance of hit. Like that's awesome, because now you made a bet where you spent a pick that had a 2% chance on a guy who had a 9% chance. That's a win. But if you're spending
too much math for me to handle here, Zach, I'm sorry. I was with you until then.
I spend way too much time with Peter Howard. I don't do math, but man, he just starts talking and it's variables and X, and we get irrational numbers, and it's just a bad scene.
I do love it though. I love that. That's a great point.
Yeah. So kind of what you were saying, and we'll go back to the first question here, Zach, since you kind of touched on it a little bit. So is draft capital, like with these kind of outliers of Puka and Tank Dell, some of these other guys that have been hitting that were later round draft picks, is it just kind of a fluky thing that we're above the mean here, so to speak, on hit rate, and it's, you know, in years to come here, we'll have these wide receiver classes that, you know, don't hit at all, and, you know, kind of what's your feeling about that with draft capital versus the hit rate that we're seeing?
Yeah, and so it like draft capital and hit rate and the first round capital absolutely matters. Like it does. Because that tells you that an NFL team is going to invest the time, energy, and snaps. Like they're going to give the opportunity to these players. So that's the first hurdle that you need to overcome as a rookie is even if you're good, you need opportunity to prove that you're good. So somebody like Puka Nacua coming in as a 5th round pick, he's got an uphill battle as opposed to somebody like Quentin Johnston who came in as a 1st round pick. He should have every opportunity throughout training camp, throughout the rookie mini camps and the preseason to prove himself. So it's a lot harder. And that's part of the reason why draft capital matters. The other part of the reason is the NFL is actually pretty good at this. I know we kind of dump on them for their drafting, but like they're pretty good at evaluating players, you know, like Belichick and wide receivers excluded. But they're pretty good at this. And so most of the time, the guys who go in the 1st round are the best players. And so you get a leg up because you have opportunity. You get a leg up because you're a better player. And that's kind of how this works. So the hit rates for rookies still decrease progressively by the round they're drafted in. And Peter Howard and Dave Wright and Jacob Rickroad have done like a ton of, just to name a few guys that I really respect, they have done a ton of work specifically on this and on the hit rates of, you know, the draft capital, draft rounds that players are taking in the NFL draft, and then the hit rates of our rookie picks by round. And they both decrease a lot, but it's not predictive. And this is what we were talking about before. Like they're not saying that because this player was taken in the top 12, he's going to be successful. He's just got a better chance to be successful. And so, you know, you still have players who are drafted and flame out, even though they're 1st round picks, N'Keal Harry. I'm not sore about that at all. I'm not. They definitely, you know,
that's twice the spot inside of 30 minutes that you've mentioned N'Keal Harry, and I was having a good time.
I'm sorry. I'm a very bitter. I'm having post-traumatic Rod Rust flashbacks. I sat through a 1-15 Patriots team when I first started caring about football. You know, like 8-year-old Zach is there and Rod Rust just running the team into the ground. And now I'm back here with this team that should have lost to the Bills. Like I was cheering against them. I wanted them to lose. You know, just fully embrace the you know, maybe we can end up with Drake May. Maybe you get Marvin Harrison Jr. It doesn't matter. Somebody to add to this team that is just abysmal. So I'm sorry. I got N'Keal Harry on the brain. It just flashbacks. Like N'Keal Harry's in the trees, man.
All right. I know you touched on JSN as one of your kind of guys you're expecting to have a strong second half of the season. Is there anyone else that you would be focusing on right now to kind of take that jump in the second half here that you would be trading for?
The injury, well, of course, I wish you had me on last week because it would have been JSN, it would have been Jordan Addison. Though, like those were the top 2 wide receivers in the class for me. They had underwhelmed. That feels like a little bit of a cop-out now since Addison went off for 100 and whatever it was yards yesterday, and JSN had a touchdown and 60 or 70. To me, right now, it's maybe Rashee Rice in Kansas City, who started off a little slow, scored another touchdown this last week. People are still kind of like hemming and hawing. Andy Reid doesn't really like young wide receivers. He doesn't play rookies. But guess what? Patrick Mahomes likes him. Mahomes likes him because he's open all the time. And Rashee Rice did that in college. He drew tons of targets. He can go down the field. He can play big, but he can also separate, and he has a nose for the end zone. So that is a player that I really am interested in acquiring. And so and to me, it's that, or it's somebody like a Charbonnet or a Roschon Johnson, who you don't wish injury on anybody, but you also understand the landscape of the NFL. And I think Charbonnet and Roschon Johnson are both very, very talented running backs in a position where you have that elevator, in a position where if something were to happen to Kenneth Walker, say he wins Publishers Clearinghouse, he gets a month-long vacation, he's going to Bora Bora, all of a sudden Charbonnet could step in. Charbonnet has, I think, better pass-catching chops than Walker does. He's not quite as explosive, but Walker's a top 8 running back right now in PPR. So why not go attack that, where it's kind of the theory behind zero RB. So people get scared of zero RB because I think you're not drafting running backs. So the real title of zero RB, when Sean Siegel wrote the original article, is anti-fragility. It's a bet against injuries, because that running backs get injured at a higher rate than other positions. So adding somebody like Charbonnet, adding somebody like Roschon Johnson for the second half of the season, to me, it's a smart bet.
Mm-hmm. Now, I've been a big Roschon fan all through the offseason. I said going into the season, I figured by the second half here, he would be the main ball carrier in Chicago. With what we've seen Foreman do and Khalil Herbert's coming back from injury, is there still a clear path for him to take over that backfield?
There's never a clear path, but I think that, again, it's a matter of opportunity. It's what Deontay Foreman did this past week. It's the what if. It's the, man, if Roschon Johnson had been healthy. And that's what you're hoping for, because to me, he is an absolute workhorse back. Like, he is phenomenal. And the only reason he didn't get to do that in college is because he is behind one of the top 3 running backs that I've watched since 2017. Like, in terms of film grade, it's Christian McCaffrey, it's Saquon, and then we're at Bijan and Jonathan Taylor. Like, he is that guy. And so it was hard for Roschon Johnson to get any traction in college. And also, I don't know how much you guys know about Roschon Johnson coming into college. He was a quarterback in high school. Okay, so he came in, had not played running back until he got to college.
Oh, wow.
And so he played at Groves High School in Texas. He had 7,710 passing yards. He had 4,900 rushing yards and 85 total touchdowns as a high school quarterback. The guy was an absolute monster. And he came in, they were like, yeah, you know what? We're gonna move you to running back. And so he kind of bounced around, learned the position. And you can tell that he played quarterback when he is in pass protection. That man blocks like crazy, which you expect to eventually get him on the field. He's a great pass catcher and a good runner. So, like, all of those things I love. Sometimes, the NFL, they make guys earn it. It's just kind of what we do, and especially with the running back position.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with
and we never know we never know what the Bears are doing. That makes sense.
I also can't believe that his college literally did to him what the NFL tried to do to Lamar Jackson unsuccessfully, thankfully.
Yeah.
But that really happened. The man had to go through that. He changed his position. That's crazy talk.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what about I know we've talked a lot about the running backs and wide receivers. Let's switch it up and talk quarterbacks here for a little bit. I mean, it is the sexiest position. Let's be honest. We've got Stroud, who has played really, really well throughout this rookie season. We've got Young going through some growing pains. Richardson can't really make an evaluation from the limited play time. Although, I guess asking you, the rookie guru here, from what we saw from Richardson for those first few weeks, does that give you hope that he can take that next step? Because I know a lot of the knocks on him was his accuracy, and we were hoping he'd play this year and maybe take that Josh Allen next step next year. But now that he's been shelved, does this change anything, or what are your thoughts on that?
So again, it's, to me, we're playing a different game than the NFL is, and I think it's difficult sometimes to separate it. But what we're playing is a proxy. So like an NFL quarterback does not equal a fantasy quarterback. For fantasy, Anthony Richardson is fantastic because he is, the goal line back. First of all, he has potential to take off and add points with his legs at any time. The problem I think that we're going to see with him is that accuracy, and is he going to be able to throw? He's got to complete better than 60% of his passes. Like that's just, and he was right on that. Like this was a nice start to a career. He's completing 59.5% of his throws. Obviously short season, small sample. The injuries, he got nicked up a couple times, but it's not a bad start. But I do think that the NFL is scared of guys who they're quick to go away from them. I mean, how quick were people ready to turn on Justin Fields? How quick, are they to Trey Lance? And now I wasn't a Lance guy, but like he didn't ever really get an opportunity outside of 4 games in his rookie year where they were just like, yeah, here, run, to prove himself. And so the NFL, and it's really funny because they've started to kind of turn, but it's a little bit like turning an aircraft carrier. Like it's really slow. They're thinking on it because they are quick to default back to that pocket passer, that comfort, that this is what we've always done. Even the Lamar Jackson, and it's funny to watch Dynasty 3 weeks ago. If you tried to trade Lamar Jackson, you could not get anything for him. And it was because people were worried that he's just a runner and maybe he's at the end of his rope as a runner. And then you have last week where he throws for whatever, everything all the time.
It's real casual. Yeah.
Like he has always been a better thrower. Jalen Hurts has always been a better thrower than somebody like Richardson. And so to me, it's a little bit of a scary proposition for Dynasty. I would treat him as a running back in the way that I think about him in Dynasty, because the way I play running backs is I'm going to use them for 2 years, 3 at the outset, and then I'm going to try to trade them for a pick and a young, what I consider a young proven player. Usually it's wide receiver. That's how I trade running back. So I'll use a running back for 2 years, maybe 3, and then trade them depending on where my team is at. And I think I would treat Richardson the same way, because I don't think you're guaranteed the longevity if he does not develop into a passer. I think you're going to get his 4 years or 5 years of a rookie contract, and I think they'll use him because he's talented. But if they can't get over the hump as an NFL team, there's nothing tying them to Anthony Richardson. So again, he's very good, heartening. I like what we've seen, but I haven't seen enough yet as a thrower not to mentally treat him like a running back when I am looking at my dynasty rosters.
It's a great way to put that. I've never once considered it that way, but now it's all I'm going to be thinking about. I was actually in your first part thinking I'm going to go find who has him in my dynasty league and send a trade offer. And then you got further into your statement and I said, well, okay, I will back off a little bit.
And I don't mind the trade offer part of it. Like, I don't mind going and acquiring him, especially where he's injured. You might be able to get him for somebody he's a running quarterback. So there's this logical fallacy that they get injured more often. which is really funny because oftentimes the running quarterbacks can kind of manipulate the hit that they take because they see it coming, as opposed to a guy who's not mobile, who's getting hit from the blind side, and you don't have time to kind of, situate yourself. So I'm not averse to going and trading for Richardson any more than I would be averse to going and trading for Breece Hall or Bijan Robinson. Like I will go acquire those players, but I'm acquiring them with the idea that my window for them is 2, maybe 3, because I want to trade them before their value starts to go. And I'll give up a year or 2 of production to get back the value, to recoup the value. And like with running backs, it happens so often, and you're making this bet. And this is another one of those where we talk about percentages. You talk about making a bet, and you have to do it every time. Because if you don't, and you start picking and choosing, you get caught with Todd Gurley. And like, look, you trade CMC, and you missed out on CMC because he's this incredible player and he's continuing to produce. But maybe you got back, AJ Brown and a draft pick. It's not that bad. Or maybe you got back Justin Jefferson and a draft pick, like at the beginning of Jefferson's career. Same thing with Jonathan Taylor. Like if you traded Jonathan Taylor after his, he was the running back 1. That's when I want to get out, not because he's the running back 1, but because I've already had 2 years of Jonathan Taylor. And now it's time for me to recycle that to go get a young proven wide receiver, which is how I build my dynasty teams, and get another pick, get a first-round pick. All of a sudden, I can add another running back to that wide receiver, and I've got a nucleus to build on. And so that's just kind of how I approach that.
I love it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We talked about Anthony Richardson, who's out the rest of the season. Which quarterback who's still, fingers crossed, healthy and going to stay healthy from these rookies would you rather have the rest of the way then?
I mean, it's got to be Stroud. Stroud's shown so much that like he's been, and he was my QB3 coming out. I had them, with grades, I had them Bryce Young, Stroud, Richardson. For fantasy, you had to have Richardson to me first, and then Young and Stroud, at least on film. But like I always describe watching quarterbacks and trying to evaluate quarterbacks is a little bit like throwing darts blindfolded in a hurricane. Like you can kind of figure out like which direction sort of they're going, but
that's understandable.
Well,
wide receiver, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just so much we don't know. We don't know the play call. We don't know if they're half field read. Like there's just so much we don't know, and there's so much that's predicated on what's going on in their head and how they process. It's so hard.
Well, you mentioned Stroud, so I just have to do this. And Dustin, I'm going to try to steer him towards somebody here, but I want to jump over running back to wide receiver for just a second. You cannot say Jordan Addison or Jackson Smith and Jigba for this answer. You can't do it. We've already talked about it. What other rookie wide receiver would you be interested in the rest of this season? Who would you be most interested in? Who would it be?
Are you trying to tank Dell me? What are you doing?
Never. I would never do that.
So
with my mouth, but with my eyes.
It's funny. Well, so it's funny. The way I end up drafting in the back end of my rookie drafts is listening to other really smart people. Peter Howard is one of the people that I consider really smart who I listen to. And he was on Tank Dell from the beginning. And so and what he's done has been fantastic. And I ended up with more Tank Dell than I ever thought I would. And also Josh Downs, which those are Peter Howard's 2 guys that he loved. And I'm like, all right, whatever. I got a 3rd round pick. There's nobody here that I really want. Peter, you're the guy. I'm gonna take Downs, or I'm gonna take down. Those 2 players I think have been really promising early, and I think they continue to be going forward. And it's really nice to see, especially with Dell, nice to see him because he gets open so easily, and that's what he did in college too. Is he just separates? He's going to have 4 or 5 yards because he can come up, plant, get a defender going one way. It's almost like that Iverson crossover, and then he's gone the other way, making a defender guard him in two different directions. So if you can get him going one way horizontal and also drive vertical, now they've got to make up two directions. That's what Dell does, and Stroud is really good at finding that open player. And so that's like I don't disagree with that at all. This is a good class. This is a good class.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. All right. I won't take up any more time trying to force that particular issue. I deferred back to you, Dustin.
All right. And let's finish off with the tight ends here. Laporta has been amazing. Nothing that I expected, at least this early on in his career, especially with how the Lions treated TJ Hawkinson. And I know you said you're a big fan of Mayer and Kincaid. What about after that? Any of the rookies that maybe you'd be targeting that you think are going to have a strong second half of the season here?
So rookie tight ends, the second half of the season thing is not what I'm looking for. Like rookie tight ends, it's really hard to get on the field. It's really hard to produce. It's really hard to learn because you're essentially learning how to be an offensive lineman and a wide receiver at the same time. And so, like, I loved Laporta coming up. Loved it. Like, I'm sitting there watching, and it's like, okay, he reminds me so much of George Kittle. This is fun. Even I didn't expect him to come out and be a top 5 tight end. Like, I'm sitting there going, well, if he can get in the top 15 and start to see more targets toward the second half of the year, and then the first game of the season, he comes out and he's just lighting it on fire. And I'm like, Peter's like, you're brilliant. I was like, nah, I didn't think that this was going to happen. Like, this is a little outlier in terms of, so like, there aren't any tight ends that I'm looking for. I wasn't even expecting this out of Laporta. So there aren't any tight ends that I'm necessarily expecting to be great second half or be fantasy producers. I really like Tucker Kraft. I really do. I know.
Feller Tuckeronian?
He hasn't done very much yet. He was injured early, but like, I really think that could end up being the situation like happened in Baltimore, where Hurst was drafted first and everybody was like, oh yeah. And he came out and had a couple of games early and people were all excited about Hurst. And then all of a sudden it was really Mark Andrews. Like, that would not shock me if that flips in Green Bay and Tucker Kraft is actually the tight end that you want. And I ended up with him in 5th rounds in like 3 of my leagues, I think. So, which is 60%. I'm not a high volume guy. I'm not a portfolio player. I'm like, I have 4 pages of a notebook folded into my pocket, and that's how I play. That's it.
I love it.
Well, it'd be nice if the Packers actually could have a couple relevant tight ends on their squad for a change after not having one what feels like forever. All right. So is there anything else, Zach, that you want to talk about here in regards to this class that you feel like we haven't touched on yet?
So I just want to go back and reiterate this because I feel like I got kind of beaten about the head and face because this class 2 years before was the next great thing. It was the best class ever. And then when we got into the draft process, so many people are saying, oh, trade away your 23 picks. This class is terrible. And I'm still sitting there like I'm watching tape and I'm like, this is still that class. Like, this is that class. There are 2 running backs. There are at least 2 identifiable receivers with 4 or 5 more that are really good. There are 3 quarterbacks, and the tight end class is really deep. Okay, so now here we are. We're 7 weeks in, headed into week 8. You've got 3 top 24 rookie wide receivers in fantasy. You have 2 top 12 running backs. Okay. You have a top 5 rookie tight end. and you've got 3 quarterbacks who have been their team starters. And Stroud has been a player that you have wanted to start on your fantasy teams as a rookie. I don't know. Don't go back and look at Peyton Manning's rookie year because you did not want to start him. Like this class is that class. It has been everything that everybody built it, and we got Puka Nacua out of it.
Like a little bonus cherry on top. Why the hell not? It's incredible. Well, you tell him you deserve. I know you're not the guy to do it. I know you don't like the victory laps yourself, but I think you deserve one. I think you should do it.
Nah, to quote Bob Dylan, it ain't me, babe. I don't. That's not my thing. I'm very bad at self-promotion. We were in the DFPN chat last night, and J Mike and I were going back and forth, just being excited about Jordan Addison, who is both of our wide receiver one. And we're talking, and all of a sudden he says, I wish we were better at self-promotion. I'm like, it feels so gross though, doesn't it?
It does for the most part.
It
really
does.
Yeah.
I mean, the only time I like to do it is when I'm rubbing it in Jake's face. But other than that, out to the masses, I'm the same boat. I don't like
when you can look somebody in the eyes and do it. That's when it's okay. When you stare them directly in their soul, that's when Dustin's all right with it.
That's right. Okay, well, let's move on here. Kind of wind down here the show. Move away from rookies. We'll look ahead here, more redraft oriented the rest of the show. We'll do our starts of the week here. The recap last week, Jake, you had Christian Watson at Denver coming in with a paltry 5.7 points. Eric jumped in with the start of the week. He had Romeo Doubs also at Denver, slightly better at 11. And then I took Brian Robinson at the Giants, came in at 8.3, right in the middle. None of us really hit on our starts of the week, which is really disappointing because I felt like we had a pretty good string there of a couple weeks where we were given some good advice. But let's get back on it this week. Jake, let's start with you. Who is your start of the week?
Part of this is just me wanting to will it into existence. Okay. So I put that out there initially. But doesn't it feel like Brandon Ayuk should have had 3 blow-up games the last 3 weeks? If you're just watching him play, how open he consistently is. And it's not necessarily that he's not getting targets, but he's not getting the best targets. He's not getting the most high-quality targets necessarily in these last 3 weeks. And he's managed to hover just around 10 fantasy points in full PPR during that time. Now, the matchup, it's not a matchup-based thing necessarily that I'm saying. Him against Cincinnati is this amazing thing that we get. But if we just, I'm going to take the betting advice here from Zach, right? If we consistently bet on the thing that should be happening, eventually, damn it, it's going to be proven right. And I think that Brandon Ayuk is the right bet to make every week. We're just not seeing it happen thus far. And maybe we get a little bit of the shootout here with the Bengals versus the 49ers. I mean, you would argue that you already saw that with the Vikings and it didn't happen, but I'm back in on Brandon Ayuk here, hoping for a nice top 20 finish at least.
Nice. Zach, do you feel like jumping in here with a start for this week?
I could give you a start for this week. So this offense has been pretty abysmal. The Pittsburgh Steelers have been terrible, but they're playing Jacksonville. Jacksonville has given up the second most quarterback won games so far this season. They have also tied for the second most wide receiver won games given up this season. George Pickens is going to have a game. Burn it to the ground. George Pickens, at least a touchdown and some big yardage. Maybe a one-handed catch too.
Oh, yeah. Just for style points. If you're in a league that gets style points, especially, just be waiting for that. It's going to be amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And my start this week, I didn't put anything on the show sheet because every time I was looking at the schedule, trying to figure out what the hell start I was going to give you guys, I kept coming back to one and I didn't want to do it because it's going against my homerism here. But I'm going to go out after the Jordan Addison breakout party last week. I'm going to go back to the well with him. going against my hometown Packers. He is the real deal. We don't know yet if Jair is going to play or not. He's been out the last couple weeks. So if he doesn't play, our secondary is really beat up right now. So it'll be pretty easy feasting for Captain Kirk and Jordan Addison. So I expect them to have another big week this week.
Yeah, fine. I'll allow it. Only because we've talked about Jordan Addison on this show a bit. I hope that it doesn't happen for selfish reasons, but I think you're going to be right. JL Garofalo, by the way.
Hey, JL.
In the chat, my boyest, he says. That's B-O-I-Y-U-S. And he said that spelling was inspired by me saying Ayuk is going to finish. I didn't make the connection personally, but I'm a pretty stupid guy. So that could be on me and not on JL.
Okay, Jake. And that just leaves us with one final thing on the show sheet here before we sign off for the evening. And that is our upcoming shot bet. It's your turn to said bet. So lay it on us.
Look, man, I thought about not making this gross. There's a great one on here that I could do. I could say, let's stay out of the grossness. Let's make it a primo versus primo guy. I decided against it. I decided, let's get gross. Let's do this thing. And Zach, you are under no obligation to put yourself on one side or the other of this, but you are allowed to either side. Pick your favorite. We're not doing one player versus one player. We're not doing position versus position. We are doing one player versus two players at their respective position. We talked about Jacksonville and the Steelers. I want to know, are you more interested in full PPR, Travis Etienne on one side, or Najee Harris plus Jaylen Warren on the other side? What do we feel here? Dustin, kick us off. Do you want to believe that the power of two can actually overcome Etienne?
Do I want to believe? Yes, I do. Do I actually believe that? I don't know.
I see. So you want some more time to debate this, I think. Well, Zach, what do you feel like if you were to choose one side? What would it be?
I think I'll take the ETN side, and as a pass guy, I think that you're going to see some TJ Watt and some I got to get the ball out quick, and that benefits ETN.
I don't hate it. Dustin, have you decided? Does that sway you at all?
That
he needs the ball out.
That was my biggest concern, was just that front line for Pittsburgh. But I think I will stick with my gut and go ETN as well.
All right, gentlemen. Well, I get the benefit of two. Was this maybe a ploy on my part to hope that you would pick the two? Yeah. Did I oversell it? Probably. So I will be back here probably to take the shot and call you both geniuses next week, but we will see.
All right. Any final thoughts from either of you here before we sign off for the evening?
I got one. JL, John Luke in the chat, congratulations. I saw he got married this past weekend, so
he did it.
Congratulations.
Very big congratulations. I think that's probably the third best day in his life, behind only when he got to meet me for the first time. And then second was when he won his fantasy league last year. I heard all about it after I met him the first time. So I think this is a top 3 moment, though.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Zach, I'll give you a moment here to plug anything you want. Tell the folks where they can find you, what you're up to, things like that.
So you can find me at the Dynasty Dummies, but I'm always going to plug Fantasy Cares, fantasycares.org. You can donate there all year round now. It's a 501c3 charity organization. And if you find their YouTube, you can watch the SFB 13 weekly wrap up with Russ Fisher. And there are giveaways. There are places you can donate. There are a lot of fun things. To me, Fantasy Cares and adding that charity element to your leagues. Even if you're not involved with Fantasy Cares, you can do that. You can throw one of your league dues to a charity, pick it. You'll feel better about it. It's disposable income. It's a great thing to do. And so that's always my parting shot is charity and fantasycares.org.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, as always, folks, thank you for joining us. You can find my partner at Jake Trowbridge. You can find the podcast at Drinking Fantasy, or you can find me at FF Dusty Dog. We are here for all of your fantasy or non-fantasy related questions. Do all the things we tell you to do every week. Give us 5 stars, give us a rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. So you know when we are doing what we're doing, when we go live, all that fun stuff. And as always, folks, we'll see you next week. Keep drinking and talking fantasy football.
Cheers, FFers.